Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Reboot Civilization. My name is CJ Morgan, and tonight I'm joined by Alexander. Hi, Chad.
Hi, CJ.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's good to be back here with you, covering another very interesting topic.
Mhm. So, Chad, does democracy exist in 2050?
Okay, so in recent years, we saw uprisings around the world over the course of the last 7 years. One of them was the Arab Spring. Um, Another one was Occupy Wall Street. There just have been a whole bunch of sort of grassroots uprisings where it seemed like they didn't know what they wanted. Like the Occupy Wall Street people, it seemed like if they were asked, like, well, what are you protesting? They're like, well, we don't know. We're just protesting the 1%. Um, but fundamentally, what it is that these groups that were rising up and protesting were feeling the technological environment, um, which is a leveling of the playing field by giving everybody the same tools in the digital world. They're feeling that environment colliding with the old institution of representative democracy.
Hmm. Could you
So,
define representative democracy for those that don't know?
yeah, representative democracy is like if you look at the US, the Republic, they have representatives that are elected by people to go and represent them. So each
Okay.
representative represents a large number of people and does their voting for them on all the specific issues. So you don't vote for the issues in representative democracy, you vote for the person. And then the person goes and does the voting for you by proxy.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll be in a jurisdiction where you didn't even vote for the person that got elected. You either didn't vote or you didn't vote for that person. So we're starting now to see the breakdown of representative democracy. And we also saw it in the last election in the US with Trump because the popular vote was won by Hillary Clinton, but Trump won on the old electoral college system, which
I'm
is
the Alex Jones crowd.
right.
Yeah.
But this is a systematic issue, right?
Mm.
People intuitively think, hey, wait a minute, why are certain regions of the country worth more votes than other ones? That doesn't make sense in 2017. I mean, if we go on a website where everyone gets a vote, like everyone's vote counts the same, there's no special, like certain groups of people get their votes weighted more than others. It's all flat, it's all
Mm.
equal. So people are confused. And I think, especially with millennials being born into the world that was completely wired up with what they used to call the information superhighway, the World Wide Web. Um, Everybody had access to all information, and anybody could produce and distribute their content the way that was only possible before by large media networks. So now everybody has the same powers. So they're saying, "Hey, I'm like a superpower, a publisher and distributor of content, and I'm a super huge human being, just like everybody else. So who are these people in Washington or in Dublin or in Brussels are making all these decisions for me? Like that's not cool. I've got all day. Most people don't work anymore. You know, there's parts of the world where people are now being put on universal income.
Mhm.
So they have all the time in the world to sit there and vote. So they're like, why are these elite people doing the voting for me? So it's already starting to crack.
Yeah,
And it
especially
really,
with the uprising of polls. Like, there's so many polls and surveys going around the internet right now. Like, it generates enough controversy that it can actually end up as a referendum, which is kind of exciting. The people are getting their voice heard using technology.
yeah,
So it's 2017 now. In 2050, is that going to explode? And because of, like, they didn't have internet and polling in Greek and Roman times where democracy came from. So, like, does that mean democracy is going to slowly go in decline, or is it going to become more democratic?
Okay. Well, two things. I'm going to go back to the election with Trump and Clinton. It's a tear in the fabric of the United States electoral system, which has actually it has actually led to a cold civil war
Mhm.
in the U.S. It's a cold civil war. It's not a hot war like the original Civil War, where people are running around shooting each other. Well, I guess they are, but I mean, it's not on that scale. So it's a cold civil war, and I think fundamentally one of the things is that half the country thinks that they successfully elected Hillary Clinton. The other half of the
Mhm.
country believes that they successfully elected Donald Trump. And it's two systems. It's one that is popular vote, the other one is electoral colleges. So you've got a fragmentation there that's breaking down. So that's accelerating it. And the other thing is a statistic that I read recently that most millennials don't believe that democracy is even the best form of political. It's not the best form of political structure, not the best political
Mhm.
structure. So they don't have
Yeah.
that. Their faith in democracy is waning.
So is
But
there a
again,
crisis
say
in how
again.
the collective, is there a crisis coming in how the collective thinks, how it's organized?
It's a collision between different species of media consumers, which is what we all are. We're media consumers and producers, but there are different species. Like I said, anybody born after 1980 doesn't have a memory of what the world was like before the World Wide Web.
Hmm.
It just they didn't exist long enough in that world to remember where information was centralized, and that
But it's,
centralizing
sorry.
and that centralization of info created a feeling in people's minds that that it was okay for government to be centralized. But the new species doesn't understand. They can't identify with the idea of a centralized government. That's why you're seeing things that are decentralized, like all over the place. Every technology that has made major headway in the last 20 years has been a sort of like an unbreakable decentralized technology. So take, for example, file sharing. Initially, file sharing was done with FTP, which was centralized. So we put all the files on one server and people log into it and get files. Well, at the turn of the millennium, that was obsolesced by things like Napster, where you had bits and pieces of files distributed all over on everybody's computers. And that creates a system that you can't, no authority, no central authority can take that system down for long because there's too many nodes. It's a self-healing system. You take down one node, it doesn't matter. The rest of the system's so redundant, it just keeps on going. So what I'm getting at is these underlying technological paradigms, those dictate our social structures. So if we're living in a decentralized technological environment, it's of course it's going to happen that on the social level, that social level is going to conform to the technological level. It's like Marshall McLuhan said, first we make our tools, and then our tools make us. He's talking exactly about that socializing, social engineering force that happens when you unleash new technologies. So yes, CJ, technologies are going to break the old institutions.
Is digital democracy.
Right.
So
So
it's like,
yeah, there's a whole
yeah.
field of democracy called direct democracy. And there's some places, I think there's a village in Switzerland that actually does direct democracy where it's a form of participatory democracy. That's what it is. So everybody's
Mhm.
involved in voting on the issues. They all file into the village square and they cast their ballot on specific issues. Like, should we build a little bridge across this river? Everybody comes down and they all vote on that issue. So the digital version of that now has been made possible by the fact that we're immersed in all these social media technologies. Because if you look at how Trump won the election, it was mostly through his use of Twitter. And I know it can be his worst curse as well, according to some people, the way that he flies off the handle on Twitter, but it's actually what won him the election because of everyone was able to organize on Twitter to support Trump because they could not organize on the ground. So people who were supporting Trump might have been in communities where they weren't allowed to voice that opinion.
So would you say this election is the first form of digital democracy?
Yeah, so this election was it was the biggest hack in human history. Okay? So when they say was the election hacked? Yes, the election was very hacked. Was it hacked by Russia? No, it wasn't hacked by Russia. It was hacked by 60 million people who voted for Trump because of the way that what happened on Twitter with their coordinating efforts. And the great meme war of 2015 and 2016, as soon as Trump said he was running for president, the kids in the 4chan news groups and on Reddit, they went to work creating memes. They went to work creating fake news stories. It was a propaganda initiative that would have made Joseph Goebbels jealous from the Nazis. I mean, this is the most massive propaganda explosion that the world has ever seen. And whether their facts were real or not, that's not what we're here to contest. At the end of the day, whoever gets their message out there bigger and more consistently, they're gonna wash over the other messaging. And then just the immense force of how these social media technologies, especially around Twitter, were mobilized to produce news. Trump didn't have to have his own spin department. He didn't need a PR department because he had the people on Reddit and 4chan were just voluntarily doing it for them. So the result was hacking the mind of the voter in America. If you hack the minds of the voters, they're going to go and they're going to cast their ballot. You know, you don't need to hack the machines. So yes, that's what we've seen. We've seen a form of digital democracy happen for the first time, but it was a hack. So what happens is first there's a hack, and then it becomes institutionalized. So the hack is phase one. The institutionalizing of it is phase two. And that's what we're starting to crystallize into now. And you're seeing you're going to see a massive balkanization across the world. And it's already started in Spain, right?
Well,
Catalonia is.
I can see a fusion of and digital democracy. That's what I foresee. Like in 2050, you won't be physically required to go to a polling station and make a paper vote. You'll just be able to do it online. And then the direct democracy, because it's all algorithms, we won't need representatives because it'll be all done through voting. Every person will have an opinion, and every person can upvote or downvote an idea, and then that can be made into a referendum, digital referendums, and they'll be happening on a daily basis. And we'll see like the decision-making process of how society turns speeding up rapidly to a point where we progress exponentially. Like,
perfect. That's perfect. So take an example. There's an example in history that we can apply to this evolution of digital democracy. Just look back at how not even 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, we got all of our news from newscasters, like specialists in the special journalists who would go around and collect information and present the news on our behalf. So it's as if we were all hiring these people to come and tell us what was going on in our world, right?
Yeah.
The experts. And then with the rise of the mobile smartphone with cameras on them, now we're doing it ourselves. We don't need these giant networks with these specially carefully curated journalists who are going to tell us, like Walter Cronkite used to say, and that's the way it is. We don't need people to tell us that's the way it is anymore. We know we can go and find out for ourselves. CJ, you can have your own network with your own friends who are out there pulling images as they're going around, I'm at this concert, here's what's going on. Someone else saw an accident and they're recording it, and you're seeing it all on your Facebook feed, and that's your own personal network.
Hmm.
So that is a perfect example of what's going to happen to the old institution of representative democracy.
I just
We're
don't
just
see like the world of holograms and the future of 2050, walking up to a polling station and signing physical paper, because at that point trees will be so precious, it'll be oxygen
well,
supply.
no,
Everything will
definitely
be
won't be. It definitely won't be paper ballots, but even the voting machines are not going to be at polling stations anymore.
no.
That's ridiculous. See, again, that's an authority. Putting all of this authority into the organization that creates these voting machines that are supposed to be so trustworthy, but they've been proven that they're not, that they're easily hacked. In fact, the company that makes the voting machines, which I won't name, what if they had a special interest and they wanted one candidate to be elected? Couldn't they skew the
That's what the
results?
whole Bush conspiracy was about. That Bush,
Exactly.
yeah.
That was exactly ever since the 2000 election that's been questioned. So people eventually like it's the world becomes more and more DIY.
Hmm.
That's what the open source software movement was when it began. It was like IBM used to make all the software and all the hardware, and nobody else could get their hands on it. And then Linus Torvalds went and created Linux, which was like an alternative to Unix. And he just said, "Here you go, world. Does the same thing. Have it." And if it wasn't for that, the World Wide Web would not have evolved nearly as quickly as it did. It would have took 50 years instead of taking like 10 years to come
Yeah.
online because
Well,
everybody could set up servers easy.
I think that, like, the decisions on behalf of the collective need to be processed faster for us to speed up and actually become the future. And I think like paper ballots are obsolete, and I think that representative government is obsolete as well, because it's inefficient to if one person goes to a representative, then they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then they finally have what they are trying to convey. And then that representative official goes to the bigger authorities, and then they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's representative. Direct democracy is you type in your 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 wish, and then it's voted on by the collective. There's no bribing. There's no human interaction.
Lobbying, lobbying, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just software. There's no buyouts like pharmaceutical companies trying to get all their medication in and all that kind of thing. Like, it takes out the corruption. Direct democracy takes out the corruption, and when you fuse that with digital democracy, then you're on the road to progression and rapid progression.
Yeah, because right now, as it stands, this is the perspective that young people have, right? We elect politicians. Who are these people? They're people who say anything, anything. They'll suck a golf ball through a garden hose in
Yeah,
order to win your vote. And then once they're elected, they don't do what you want. They don't do what you want. Like, look at John McCain, the perennial senator from Arizona. He's supposed to be a Republican. He's been in there forever, and he doesn't vote the way his constituents want. They hate him.
yeah,
You know, they're paid to live these lavish lifestyles. They jet set around the world. They get caught with their pants down very often. They create more laws than any human being could ever comprehend. Okay? And the thing is, you look at a place like Washington, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere, where you got that centralization of power and finance, and leverage. It's like no man's moral compass can withstand the corrupting forces of political society. You could take the most lily white, innocent, pure human being and send them to Washington, and I'm sure within a matter of a month, they're either going to run back home or they're going to be turned just into another swamp creature of, again, an old, corrupt institution.
hmm.
And that's what representative democracy is. It just doesn't
I think it's
gel.
obsolete, and
It
it's
is.
yeah.
It's just like, look at how many industries have been disrupted. Let's
Mm.
just look back in the last 25 years. I mean, the taxi industry is being disrupted by Uber. And every time there's a city that wants to ban Uber, that's a smell. That's called a bad corruption smell, we'll call it, meaning that the local taxi and transportation companies must be really
Powerful.
buttering the bread of the politicians to say we don't want Uber. Or another one is Airbnb, if they don't let Airbnb in the city, it means that the hospitality industry is very tight with the politicians.
Yeah.
Puppets,
These,
and certain areas of business can take advantage of that. So, but they're being disrupted. The banking industry was disrupted by PayPal. I mean, before PayPal, you had to pay crazy fees to transfer money. It took days. Wire transfers, do a wire transfer used to cost like $20 to send money. Are you kidding me? Now, like PayPal shakes like 3%.
mm,
So now you've got even more. You got Bitcoin. And you have heads of major banks coming out and saying, we need to change. Like the banks as they exist they won't exist for much longer because of Bitcoin. Like it's actually disintegrating the banking system. So there's only a couple of institutions left that haven't been completely disrupted yet. One of them is the Vatican, and the other one is politics, places like Washington, D.C.
mm.
And it's just merely a technological tilling of the soil, which is fine, is very ripe, and the technology is there to do it.
Technology is here, like, and it just needs to be organized and implemented, you know?
Right, but again, now this raises some questions. When you say implemented, it'll implement itself because of the demand, which will generate the supply of apps.
Mm-hmm.
There will be apps developed that will facilitate this. But then the question is going to be, who will be the official body or bodies, or will it use some sort of open source advisory committee to decide on which app has the force of law behind its votes?
It'll be an algorithm, and then the collective will decide the rules.
But
And
there's a dilemma there, because it's like who gets to fine tune the algorithm?
do you believe in world government, Chad?
I don't like the word world government, because world is an old like United Nations era term. Let's talk about, I'd rather say like a fabric government.
With
So
the
whatever this is we live in, this digital fabric or membrane government. How do we govern?
the price of a new world order. Everywhere you go, it's new world order, like years ago.
Yeah.
And like I always wonder, like, you know, as a film student, um, I always wondered who's making these videos, because the quality of the video was so high that it wasn't being made by the people at the time that were releasing the videos, because they didn't even have the software or
Right.
the editing, or, you know, like all the clips that they were using. They didn't have, where would they get the clips? Like, you know, this is the era before drones, like, you know. And I always wondered, was this new world order like made by the TV and officials? Because like it just, the quality of the content was so high relative to the, at the time, like the amount of need to actually produce content like that, you know.
Hmm.
This whole new world order thing, I think it was fabricated, and it was created by the authorities to create this idea of a world government, to embed that in people's mind, even though it's done as a negative conspiracy tone, you know.
Yeah, I hear you, but what I'm saying is the old categories. So someone says, "Are you pro world government? Are you pro open borders and all this?" I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to engage with those old categories. Like, come
Yeah,
on.
I think that's
Let's
very
look
like 2007 kind of thing, you know.
it's like very 1958 sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Because as soon as a satellite was launched into orbit around the planet, that changed everything. That turned the whole world into a programmed box.
mm.
Okay? And that made programming the main art form of human beings.
You see,
The
I think
programming environment has taken everything. Just look, the programming environment rules everything. So if we want to talk about what government, world government, national government, those are so tiny. Those are
yeah,
such tiny
I
terms. You
think
have to
where it
say
went wrong was
technological government.
they were basing it on representative government. They wanted the new world order as a representative government. What they don't realize is they're being obsolesced and direct democracy and digital democracies combining, and the algorithm is the new world order.
That's right.
Yeah,
Today, the algorithm.
they didn't see the software was actually the big monster coming to get them.
Yeah,
You know.
and that's because people throughout history, they went from like paying attention to their little village, so village government,
Mhm.
regional government, um, national government, and then continental government, and then world government, space government. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But really, it's actually gotten the governing entity has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mhm.
So you could say it's the AI algorithm government.
Yeah, it got like the algorithm is what they didn't see the algorithm coming like
Well, yeah,
I
and the
I
forefathers of the
personally
United States who wrote the Constitution didn't know about the algorithm coming.
no,
They
they
had
didn't.
no idea what would happen in 240 years that would allow a computer to make better decisions about how people should go about their affairs than a
Mhm.
bunch of elected officials.
Do you think this algorithm will create a type of totalitarian?
I'm pretty sure we're going to get a retrieval of the totalitarian state.
Mhm.
We're starting to see symptoms of it. There's a lot of if you look around on YouTube and Reddit and some of the other social media sites where they share memes, there's a lot of support for the Nazis. Like I've never seen anything like it for as long as I've been on the web or bulletin board systems before the web. So that retrieval of that old totalitarian content is a symptom of something that's happening on a larger level technologically.
Mhm.
So that totalitarian revival, that sensibility, could be a human response to the technological totalitarian government that's happening.
Well, I think it's like
That
a
humans have no
uniformity.
control over.
It's like a uniform process. Like you look at India, they've got the fastest broadband in the world, and yet
Yeah.
there's so many different parts of their society that aren't up to like first world standard. So like this unifying software is unifying, and the internet is unifying countries, and then it'll be interesting to see will that affect like living standards.
Well, it could be just like we saw with televisions where you'd have a family that was too poor to feed their kids. They lived in a tiny little bungalow, but they had an enormous 75-inch television. You
Yeah,
know,
but there's that totalitarian. Like my point is, like you can live in that bungalow and have like cold water and like one bed and six people living in a room, but as long as they have Wi-Fi, they're equal to
right?
every other person in the world who's got Wi-Fi.
That's what I mean. It's a leveling playing field. It's a play field leveler. These
But
technologies.
do you think that totalitarian unifying movement will come through the Wi-Fi into their living room and change their living quarters?
I think it exists on a different plane. I don't think that there's really a connection between the world that people live like in their daily lives and the virtual world that we sort of brush up against.
Hmm. It's just interesting because like everyone is afraid of the word communism, and
No, but they're also afraid of there's a huge backlash against fascism
yeah,
as well. So there's huge uprisings against communism, and then the other side against fascism. But the hidden ground for all of that is totalitarianism.
yeah,
I mean, it's like one side is anti-Hitler, the other side is anti-Stalin. So why are we retrieving that now? Those paradigms didn't exist since the radio environment came out.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so this is the radio environment allowed those totalitarian dictators to get into everyone's living room and beat the war drum.
Hmm.
So something's happening now where that's being retrieved as the content of a new environment.
You see, like with the notion of communism, like everyone had the same living space and like they all had the same standards and same access to food and that kind of thing. So like just from the Reboot Civilization perspective of what the world looks like in 2050, Is there still first world and second, or first, second, and third world all connected into the internet, into the hive mind, or is it all first world?
It depends on
Will
what your
digital
well, it depends on what
will
your
digital
standards are. Are you talking
delivery
about first world political structures
no
or first world
no
access to food and water? Like what
access to food
standard?
and water and housing,
Yeah.
day-to-day life, like is it going to improve the day-to-day life? Like it's interesting, I was speaking to someone older than me, and they said that when they were working 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, they had the exact same societal model as we do, like 40, 50% of your income going towards rent, like the same percentage going towards bills. Like society actually hasn't changed on a day-to-day basis. So personally, I think, or I foresee that this combination of direct democracy and digital democracy is going to first uniform the world, unify the world, and there'll be a certain standard, like a basic requirement of universal rights. And then it will indirectly change the landscape that everyone's living in. Because it's like this. Say, for example, rents are too high worldwide, okay? And then there's a referendum about a cap on what percentage of your rent or your mortgage or whatever you want to call it is coming out of your wages. So the
So like
whole
you mean like
world,
rent control, like what they did in New York City and what they're
yeah,
trying to do in Vancouver.
exactly. But like this is what I'm saying, it's just an idea. Like the whole world could decide, you know what, we're not paying 40% towards mortgage and housing anymore. We're going to pay 15%. And the collective makes an executive decision. Those executive decisions haven't happened yet. They've all been like populated into small communities and tried out on different levels, which is fantastic because we have like tests, like we results, and we can analyze how those communities got on. But imagine implementing them on a large scale.
But you mean
But then,
implementing infrastructure things like everybody should have a certain standard of roads everywhere in the world? Is that the kind of thing? You mean
yeah,
infrastructure
yeah, like
or
the whole art. I have a project called Art Evaluation, and Art Evaluation goes around and it evaluates every single city and every single landscape. So you might have grade A infrastructure, but then grade C road or infrastructure, grade C housing. So
Mhm.
then it's like they have referendum within their that community. They can make executive decisions to bring that up to the A class.
Okay.
So like basically there would be a big analysis on the whole world, and then it would be categorized, and then that would reflect on the budgets and the tax system.
Okay, but it sounds to me like a world government where I'm talking about okay, certain things.
No, no, this is a software government. That's the coin. That's how I'd coin it.
So yeah, but it sounds like okay, you're saying software is going to govern world software decisions are going to govern local chemical body
No,
infrastructure.
it's going to scan it, analyze it, evaluate it, spit it back out, and say, actually, that's your rents are 33% too high. Your cost of living based on logistics is too high.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, I get it, I get it. Okay, now listen, that okay, that exists to a certain again to a hack degree right now. So as a digital nomad, I'm always comparing the cost of living in different cities. So how much is a month's rent in, a city in Ukraine versus a city in Bulgaria? So I make a comparison between those two things in terms of like cost of living, um, clothing, food, all those different factors. It doesn't rate that site doesn't rate the quality, but it rates the cost. And then I go over to another site and it ranks like how good is the internet, how good is the air quality, how
mhm.
safe is it for to walk the streets, So it has these different criteria graded. So there's all these different sites that are grading cities. I mean, there's no one specific one that's giving all these factors centralized grading.
Well, with Earth evaluation, it basically, like as I was saying, it scans everything, and then it puts the actual relative to the world. It puts what grade it is, and then it shows like these are the changes that need to be made for you to get to this rating.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
then depending on the world classness of that city, for example, then the prices are reflected in that.
Well, if you have that, okay, so if you have Earth evaluation grading all these cities in a quantitative way,
Yeah.
then it actually eliminates a lot of policy making that would need to be done. Because
Yeah.
you don't have to have people sitting around the table um, making qualitative decisions when you've already got a grading on a balanced scorecard that says, look, there's nothing to debate here. We're a three when it comes to like public water system.
Yeah, like someone would say, like, oh, that's New World Order, that's all this kind of thing. It's not. It's software. It's like,
Okay, you know what it's like though? It's like if you heard of the ISO, the International Standards Organization.
Mhm.
They make all these different standards like ISO 9001, ISO 2700, 27001. So they have all these different standards. It'd be like ISO standard on doing digital audits, ISO standard on building a water system. So there's already standard systems in place. And I've heard it argued already that that is the world government, that the ISO is world government because they set the standards.
Well, I think the IMF is the world government because they control the money. That's the
Well,
club.
that's just, okay, ISO is just an example. The IMF is another example of a
Mhm.
world body that's responsible for setting standards.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you take the best of the best in 2017, that's grade A,
Hmm.
and then you can, so say your infrastructure was built in 1956, and then another city's infrastructure was built at in 2001 or something, and then they analyze, like say for water, for example, they analyze the water and analyze the leaks and the maintenance and if the system is still operational, and they grade that, and then they go around to the roads, they go around to the houses, they go around to the heating system based on the Kyoto protocols and all this kind of stuff. Suddenly, like, where the city that you're living in, you can identify the problems that are there, and that's what budgets and taxes for, and they
Right, right,
can.
right. But okay, these policy making groups or these legislators or whatever you want to call them, these governments, they are nothing but a band-aid and a
Mhm.
stopgap for waiting for systems to be developed where everything is monitored and probed so that everything has readings and everything has your world evaluation set of standards. So basically, if a road is not up to the standard, there's nothing to debate about.
Mhm.
It activates a system and mobilizes
I mean,
somebody to
speak
repair
for
it.
itself, like it's, reality
Yeah,
is
exactly.
reality.
And
Yeah.
if we go, like, let's just look at drinking water, okay? So let's say there's a world standard for the amount of contaminant that's allowed to be in drinking water. When the probes go off and say that the acceptable level has been breached, then there's nothing to debate. There's no vote to be
Yeah,
put before
because
the House on that. That should have an automatic technological repair response.
yeah,
So
because
what I'm saying is, just let
you
me finish, Eric. Hold on.
are. Yeah.
Automation, okay? As automation sweeps the land, and you have algorithms looking after things, and the algorithms are programmed with standards of
Mhm.
allowable heat, allowable cold, allowable contamination, allowable corruption, whatever those are. It should be a self-policing system. That is the totalitarian state that you're talking about. It's
Yeah.
already coming into being, and it can't be stopped because it's another one of these decentralized
Mhm.
animals, like file sharing, like BitTorrent, like Bitcoin. They're infinitely replicated and cannot be stopped.
I just think it's interesting because, like, when you try to put forward these ideas, everyone instantly thinks totalitarianism, communist, this kind of thing. And it's like, no, it's Earth evaluation. We're evaluating what we have in 2017. We're setting the grade, we're grading what's the infrastructure. And then every, state knows where to put their budget. So to me, it's really ABC simple, that kind of thing, and done by representative government. It's done by direct democracy, because when you're driving over a pothole in your car and you damage your car, everyone who drives over that pothole is going to get mad because they damaged their car as well.
Right, but when the car, what I'm saying is when the first car hits the pothole, it messages, because these cars are going to be self-driving and they're going to be, everything's going to be connected to the grid. And
Mhm.
it's going to tell the grid, pothole right here. And
Mhm.
then boom, a pothole bot comes racing out, fills the pothole, get on with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm. I don't know
So
what a whole bot, but like I know I don't think there's robots going to be filling the roads, like, but
why not?
oh yeah, I mean maybe in like 2100, but I think like there will be labor as well. But like, okay, so basically that idea, Earth valuation, we need to, within Reboot Civilization, we need to coin it. So have you any
Okay,
ideas?
but before you do that, can you just create a really nice link between digital democracy, which is the subject of this podcast, and the Earth evaluation? Because I don't think everyone's going to completely follow the connection there. So how do those two link up?
All right, so we'll just say um, Budapest. So surveyors come in, human surveyors come in, type in their findings after they evaluate Budapest. Budapest is then graded, and then it's all put into software. So there's a list of infrastructure like roads, housing, water, heating system, all based on like the Kyoto protocols and all that kind of thing, because everyone's trying to make the world more efficient. And then at the end of it, it says there's a pie chart, and then it says 36% of your city is grade A, and the rest needs improvement to the standard of 2000 and would say 30 or 40 or 50, whatever you want to put on it. So they have a clear roadmap. So then they have this information, they've been graded. This is where direct democracy comes in. So it's like, okay, people of Budapest, do you want your roads to be improved, your water to be improved, or your heating to be improved? And then everyone votes on an app.
Right.
That's direct or digital democracy and direct democracy.
Okay. So
It's
world
not some
evaluation.
it's not some
World
guy
evaluation.
in Budapest deciding we should do roads first. It's
Right.
everyone
Right.
deciding.
Evaluation is, or sorry, Earth evaluation is transparency. It's giving people the data that they require so that every single person can vote on any of the issues that they want to. Is
Yeah.
that
So
right?
like 76% decide we want clean drinking water, so we don't have to buy bottled water, which indirectly saves plastic, and there's water crisis in the next 20, 25 years anyhow. So they recognize that, as the main issue. It's not Congress or it's not the parliament in Budapest that has decided we're going to do water first. It's the people. And then they're empowered because they're like, oh my God, this money that I'm paying over is actually doing something that I chose to do. That's democracy.
Yeah,
My
and I think Kickstarter and the other crowdfunding sites like GoFundMe, Indiegogo, those are just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's something huge there, and it's going to come down to we want to build a, if enough people think you should build a new bridge in your city, they all go onto the crowdfunding site and they put their money where their mouth is. Because at the end of the day, where does government money come from? It comes from the taxpayers.
Mhm.
So why would you collect just an automatic amount of tax money from everybody just so that this little elite group of policymakers can decide where that money goes?
Yeah.
Screw that. Like that, come on. That model is hundreds of years old and it wasn't written for a time when such as this, when we have total digital ubiquity, okay? So now we just put it to a crowdfunding thing. If it doesn't get enough money, like if people vote with their dollars and they don't support it, your bridge isn't getting built. Okay?
Mhm.
But there's no tax, no more. You don't need to tax if you crowdfund all of your public infrastructure projects.
Mhm.
It's called supply, instead of the old supply and then demand idiotic model of the past where you make all of your your products first, and then you try to generate demand for them, and then you end up with all this waste. That's not acceptable in this
Hang on a second.
century.
Did you just say that you want to eradicate tax and replace it with crowdfunding?
Exactly. What the hell do you think tax money's for? It's for infrastructure projects. It's for
But technically, is digital democracy and direct governance, is that not just one big large crowdfunding project then? Has crowdfunded
you've got both aspects. You've got one you got one just making decisions, okay? Decisions
yeah, but
about
hear me out for a minute, okay? Crowdfunding is where an individual, can go in and I like the cause and I can donate my money and the cause gets made. Okay?
right.
So I'm a citizen of a country and I'm donating this, I'm crowdfunding all this money, which I call tax. Now, traditionally, that tax money was taken by a group of elites and squandered, right?
Right.
With direct democracy and digital democracy, when you combine the two of them, does democracy not become crowdfunding? Because
Well,
I've directly.
no. That's overly reductionist.
Okay.
Not every decision made by the population has to do with the allocation of funds. Okay?
Why
Some
not?
decisions some decisions have to do with should this old building be allowed to be torn down so that a big new building can be built on top of it. Okay,
But I
you
can put
can't hold on. You can't just raise the $10 million to build the new building
in.
on a piece of property that's like protected heritage property without it being ratified. So first you have to ratify to make that permit available so that you can have that land. So that's the voting phase. The allocation of funds phase, the crowdfunding, that's separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but my point is democracy not, when you remove representative democracy, representatives, and you replace it with direct, is that technically not one large crowdfunding project?
I'm not sure that I follow because not every decision made by the population is fund related. It's not related to money. Not every one of them is involved in losing money.
I'll break it down further. So we look at the meme of crowdfunding, and this meme has come up out of the ground and it's taking off and it's huge. Okay, so it's a new trend, like the bot, like that. It's here, it's landed, and it's there. Like, okay, so you have democracy. So say we get rid of representative democracy, then then I, the voter, so I can say I want to vote on this, yes, this, no, this, yes, no, yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my tax bill at the end of the year is X amount. And all the ones that voted, so I'll have a green light or a red light on the ones that support it, that my preference got through on. So technically I've crowdfunded it with my tax money.
Yeah, but okay. I'll just leave it at that. There are some decisions, though, that don't involve the allocation of funds.
Yeah.
So there has to be another bucket in the system where you can make decisions. For example, should same-sex marriage be allowed?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is that just a matter of people throwing money into the pot?
No.
No. So not everything is related to the allocation of funds. Therefore, you need at least
I'm talking about physical infrastructure at the moment. I'm not talking about societal changes, executive decisions based on every single.
It's the administration of the population.
Mm-hmm.
It's self-administration in the case of digital direct democracy,
Yeah.
but still administration.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, but like, okay, the reason I keep bringing up this crowdfunding thing, as no one likes paying tax. You talk to anyone and they get their paycheck and then they see the tax and a little frown comes on their face and they're like, oh, Now, if democracy was rearranged with digital democracy and direct governance, that frown would be like, holy shit, I just crowdfunded new roads, water. I'm building the future here,
Yes.
Like the feel factor between the mentality or the ideology, changing it to a crowdfunding, tax crowdfunding, or tax as in the way we look at tax at the moment, which is like, oh, you know, look how much tax I have to pay, and going to your accountant and trying to get out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it would create a different paradigm of what tax is. It's like, yeah, we're building society. I build society at work, and I give a portion of my
Okay,
wages.
but let me go back here. Okay, we have to realize we have unleashed incredibly powerful technologies over the past 100 years.
Yeah.
All right. And the massive speed up that happens with digital technologies is just, it was never foreseen by the people that framed the constitutions of the republics we live in. It wasn't, you know, the people who started the religions that we have. Everything is being just disintegrated by the speed that we're living at now. Okay? So institutions like tax, first of all, income tax was put in as a temporary measure to fund the wars, the great wars.
Yeah.
That's over now. Okay? So any lingering taxation is actually, it's worn out its welcome already. And a lot of people would rather not have it. Okay? So I'm saying, why do we have all these proxies? Why would we go around the mountain and have all these middlemen? We don't need them. If we want to build a bridge, people get together and they throw their money in on it, on the crowdfunding system, and the bridge gets built. Some people will put more money in
Yeah,
if
but
they're a
that's
corporation
just
and
private.
they want to throw
That's
$10 million in. Well, okay, but what I'm saying is there is no more public. There's only private people working together. The public is corrupt. What we call public is an old institution. I shouldn't even say corrupt. That's not fair. It's just obsolete. It's just old and it doesn't fit the new technological environment. It's like a horse and buggy, you know, pulling up with a Tesla, pulling up alongside it and then like just flying past it. These old institutions are just raggedy old institutions, and they're inhabited by people who are just abusing and exploiting the fact that these old institutions can be used as ways to siphon money out. And I promise you, CJ, there's not going to be tax in 2050, and there's definitely not going to be representative democracy in 2050. These institutions are being ripped apart so fast, and the rate at which they get ripped apart is accelerating. Look at who's controlling the space program now. It's no longer public NASA. It's now private SpaceX and Blue Origin. Amazon is now the biggest web host of all the files of the Department of Defense in the US. Those aren't even in the public government sector anymore. The government is
part of you know, corrupt corporate world like Blade Runner.
Sure. But what we used to call the public, okay, the public sector is disintegrating, okay, like a piece of paper in a rainstorm. It's just falling apart so fast. Look at the government in the US, the biggest superpower in the world. The Democratic Party is destroyed after the last election, and the Republican Party is just, it's cancerous as hell. They can't even vote together on anything. The president of the United States doesn't even go with his party anymore. He makes deals with any party. It's falling apart so fast. And all I'm saying is put your money on direct democracy, put your money on crowd-funded, private-driven infrastructure projects, because the government, the public government, isn't going to be around in 2050. It might not even be around in 2025 at the rate things are changing.
So what does that look like, Chad? Does that look like, you know, you get your wages and there's money going out, or is it that you've subscribed for your money to, you've like by subscribing you've given permission that I'll give so much to this.
Okay, you've got companies in Silicon Valley that have more cash than the U.S. government. Okay, there's corporate. Look at WeChat in China. It has 700 million users, and it consumes 90% of the time that they spend engaging with their devices. It does everything from chatting with your friends to ordering pizza to getting your dog groomed to doing your banking, all in that one app. You know how much information they have? Okay, so corporations are the new government. But the good thing about that is that corporations are in the world of capitalism. And that means the strong survive. And that means you don't have to wait 4 years to vote out the ruling party. All you got to do is pull your money. You withdraw your money. A lot of people don't like capitalism, but it does have that benefit of instant karma, okay? If a company makes a mistake, like Volkswagen, when it was discovered that there was something about their catalytic converters that was creating like pollution in the atmosphere, oh my God, did they ever get punished? United Airlines, when the Asian doctor got dragged off the airplane, beaten by the security guards, boy, are they ever paying, is Delta ever paying, or sorry, is United ever paying for that now with PR, right? So it's a more dynamic environment. It's not an institution that says, we are the government. We have the guns. No matter what happens, we're in control for the next 4 years until you vote us out. It's not like that.
But my point is, oh, just 1 second.
It's driven by demand and is driven by where people vote with their dollars. That's what it's driven by. And it's instant karma. If someone messes up, the money gets withdrawn. That's the blood leaving the company, and the company dies.
You see, my point is, I'm into streamlining things and making things efficient. That's the way my brain works. It likes to simplify. So, like, the way, logically, like, if you evaluate the world in its resources and infrastructure, and leaving the you know, like same-sex marriage and all that kind of stuff, like stuff that's not related to money, okay?
Yeah, moral decisions.
So, moral decisions. I don't know, would that be a moral decision? I was going to say moral decision.
Moral and administrative decisions.
I think it's more like evolutionary decisions.
Those are some of them. It's all the ones we just mentioned. It's not only one. It's all one.
But, so you evaluate the earth, and then you evaluate the cities, and then you have you have software that is telling you priorities, and then you have people who from the year 2017 all the way up to 250 is working on that prime directive, and it's to that, but not communist, not representative. It's direct democracy.
Yeah, and those words are going to fail us eventually. Democracy, the word democracy won't apply either. It's not even that. It's a collective totalitarianism. That's
it's
what
software.
It is. Okay, but it's collective software totalitarianism.
I use the word totalitarianism because it's been defined and it's past tense, you know, so like, or future tense in sci-fi novels. So I would say.
Okay, but I think it's more accurate than democracy.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely say it again, what you were saying there.
Collective totalitarianism. You threw in the software part, but I think that doesn't even need to be said.
So we'll say collective.
Collective.
I love collective because I think that's really cool. It's like nodes, you know, and everyone is a node and everyone gets to contribute to the collective. So you have collective software.
CJ?
Yeah.
Sorry, it just blipped out there. You have I heard you have software, and then it blipped out.
Collective software. What would it be?
We don't need to say the word software. We don't need to say the word digital. That's just like saying, you know, you have cells in your body. You're not a cellular human. You're just a human, right? So
yeah, but like,
you can leave out the software part of it. Let me explain here. It's collective totalitarianism. Usually a state governs from the center, or you can say distributed, decentralized totalitarianism. How's that? Because totalitarianism is when the state recognizes no limits to its authority. So there's no limits to the authority of this decentralized collective. There's no limits to it because it's eating everything. Everything's being disrupted by innovation, right? And it's driven by human demand. And nothing can stop it. Democracies can't stop it. Socialist governments can't stop it. It's changed even China, right? So what I'm saying is this collective or this decentralized totalitarianism is absolute power. and nothing can stop it, and it's just crushing everything else.
You see, personally, I think that representative government is going to become direct democracy by around 2020, 2025, by
Okay.
the implementation of software, encrypted software, face recognition, tax IDs, and it'll be encrypted like MasterCard. And then I think as there still will be a representative democracy, and then as time goes out, it will be a budget cut representative government because they're costing too much. And those
Right.
funds can be allocated. And then I think as time goes on, there will be some sort of grading on the planet, like Earth evaluation type process. And then there'll be clear on where individual cities or states or countries are going. And then as that starts to happen, people will start relocating and prices will fluctuate. And then borders will come up, maybe like by 2030, the idea of borders and the universal passport or the world passport, whatever you want to call it, all of that will come up, and that will be all inside of this direct governance, direct democracy. And then all the way up to 2050, everyone, it'll be all so clearly laid out that there won't even be voting. Expectations that the project is going to be finished by a certain date. And like everyone will expect to have basic standard of living like worldwide.
It's already starting. It's already starting with universal income, basic universal income in some areas.
But that's for the eradication of work.
Well, it's not for the eradication of work. Work is being eradicated by technological innovation. Nobody's making policies to eradicate work. In fact, they're always trying to save jobs, but that's a museum action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to keep the old hologram alive. So basic universal income is just a response to the decimation of the jobs environment.
Yeah. So you do your timeline. How do you foresee democracy all the way up into 250?
Okay, well, the next presidential election, if there is one, is just going to be an absolute circus. But I don't think it's going to be, there won't be any direct democracy involved. I think that the government, at least in the United States, is going to hit a train wreck because they just can't withstand this new environment, and they can't form along the old categories they used to get things done. So eventually people are going to get so fed up that they just vote for, with their dollars, vote for technologies that allow them to cast votes outside of the old political structure
So
of
we agree
centralized.
the word vote is going to be like a trend on point.
Okay, but I just
Voting.
mean on issue, taking back decision making, individual decision making on any issue. Here's an example. Iceland, okay? When their banks melted down in Iceland, their leaders said, you know what? We're not going to be like America and bail out the bankers. Screw you, bankers. You're going to sink. Well, then what are we going to do with our country? Well, we need to make some big changes. We need to rewrite our constitution in order for all this to happen. And how did they do that? Direct democracy online. They put a referendum online. People voted. People contributed to writing a new constitution. They did it all online collectively. Okay? They went around the old institutions. Now, Iceland is the case study. They're the, the model. That's the model. If you want to know where the rest of the world's going in the next like 5 or 10 years, just look at what happened, how Iceland turned things around.
Yeah. And Holland with their homelessness. They made homelessness illegal.
But that's different. That's done through the old institutions as they are with their parliamentarian system. I'm talking about the people of Iceland, which is not even a big country. I don't think there's even 1 million people that live in that country, but they were able to mobilize online and rewrite their constitution and turn everything upside down by hacking and circumventing the old parliamentarian institutions that they had.
So just from the Reboot Civilization perspective, we've got two projects that I can see. We've got Earth evaluation, the grading system for the planet, and then we have digital democracy.
Yes.
The software. So do you think like that those would be two, like would you validate those projects?
I think they're both essential. I don't think they're voluntary. I think they're just going to happen. They're happening as a result. They're going to grow out of the forces that are, like I said, tilling the soil, like turning everything upside down, uprooting everything.
So we should really get started and like put our roots down and
and that's the thing about Reboot Civilization is that it's like an open source project. I always knew that the way that open source software projects run, that was the future of how society was going to be run. Civilization is keep everything transparent. All the component parts are there for you to check out of the repository, make some changes, submit them back in, and if everyone agrees that they're good enough, then they get put into the main development stream, right? And that system has worked. That's what's got us here technologically. If it wasn't for open source software projects, like I said earlier, we'd still be looking at like a 1995. We'd be on Windows 95. We'll put it that way.
What's really exciting, like the idea of like, the golden circle, that's what they're called here in Europe, like, that the representative government would eventually be eliminated and then the power is put back into the people's hands, which is actually the definition of democracy. And, then we use software, so you don't have to physically go in to vote. You just vote on your mobile device or your smartphone.
Yeah, and I had heads up on all this back in the early 90s when I read the diary, Android Memes and Anachrony Diaries from Bob Dobbs. And he talked about how his father was a member of the Priory of Sion, and even back in the early part of the 20th century, he was meeting with people like Aleister Crowley and Hitler and people who were running Europe and the Fondy families that run Europe. And they were all worried because they're like, we've lost centralized control. And all we have now is to create the illusion of centralized control through the media. But it's not going to hold forever. And fast forward to today, and public sector is just rotting very quickly and being replaced by hot, innovative, breakthrough, disruptive, collective technological environments.
Yeah. Very well put. Well, I think we encapsulated that topic. Does democracy exist in 2050?
It did not.
We did a good attempt.
Not representatively, that's for sure.
No. But I think we both agree representative is gone, direct is coming in, and digital is en route,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you any other things you'd like to say before we finish up?
No, I think we said the most important things that need to be said about that, and it just allows us to give my prediction. The representative part of the representative democracy, I said, with Iceland being the example, the model, is just like the writing on the wall. But I'd say by the end of the next decade, the majority of governance is not going to be representative. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, definitely. So 2 open source projects, Earth evaluation and digital democracy, and they're open source. So feel free to type in the comments or get in contact with us if you're interested in teaming up and adding your ideas into this project. Chad, thanks a million. That was really good fun.
Hey, thanks, CJ. Always a blast.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
All right, till next time.
Okay, cool. Bye.
Bye.